child starts at a different place, pace. And no assessment or product is better able to capture those differences than NWEA's Measures of Academic Progress, or MAP. Based on over 30 years of research and refinement, our MAP assessments are computerized and adapt in real time to student responses and yield results that help pinpoint skills and knowledge. Here's how it works. Unlike most formative tests, MAP assessments are computerized and adapt in real time to student responses with test questions that pinpoint skills and knowledge. The first question a child sees helps to establish where they are in their learning on a subject. If a student answers correctly, he or she is presented with a more difficult item. If a student misses an item, he or she gets an easier question. This methodology yields rich, nuanced results that empower educators to make informed decisions. The results are built on an equal interval scale called RIT. It is extremely stable for consistent growth measurement over time. It also helps educators determine proficiency level, instructional readiness, and the selection of resources that provide just the right level of challenge. NWEA's MAP assessments were created by educators and scholars seeking to uncover the potential in every child. Today, NWEA employs scores of researchers who analyze data and continually improve assessments so that they best gauge student capacity in a variety of subjects and skills. Best of all, data from MAP assessments provide the kind of insights that teachers can act on almost immediately. MAP assessments yield data that support differentiated instruction. Every student has different capacities. With insights from MAP assessments, teachers can target areas of learning to support and challenge. Flexible grouping. Data from MAP assessments lets you define flexible grouping for instruction based on a student's performance in specific goal areas. Proficiency projections. MAP tests align with state curriculum standards and provide an excellent indicator of how students will fare on state proficiency tests. Program assessment. A vast database of results enables analysis of program performance at every level, from classroom to district, and allows for rapid adjustments to maximize impact. MAP products include MAP, which covers math, reading, and language use for grades 3 to 12. MAP for primary grades can be used with K to 2 students to assess math, reading, and language use. MAP for science, grades 3 to 12. For over 30 years, MAP assessments have been at the heart of NWEA's efforts to promote kid-centric education. We're pleased to say that in the time MAP assessments have been used throughout the country and across the globe, we have helped millions of kids achieve their dreams.
This video is an opportunity to better understand
All right. So I want to just give you just a parent's guide to what MAP is. And as was said in the video, it's just really a way for us to really assess each of your children's needs. And so it's similar to other standardized tests in that it gives us an assessment of how your child is performing based on state or national standards, and gives us a point of comparison to see how your child is doing compared to perhaps other children in our school, in their classroom, in the district, in the state, or nationally. And once we know that, we kind of know what we need to work on as teachers. So as I said in the video, MAP is a computer adaptive test, so all of the children take this test in our computer lab. And if your child answers a question correctly, this was in the video, the next question is going to be more challenging. If they answer incorrectly, the next one is going to be easier. And this type of assessment challenges our top performers. If your child is used to taking the IO test of basic skills or some of the other tests, SATs, ACTs, they're all written the same way. Your child can leave that test feeling, I got almost all the answers right. I knew everything. This test is very different. And so a high-performing student, if your child is used to being in the 95th percentile on a test, they probably left the MAP test very frustrated because it is going to force them to get 50% wrong. If they get the very first question right, the next question is going to be harder. If they get that question right, the next question is going to be harder. If they get that question right, the next question is going to get harder, until they get one wrong, and then they're going to make it easier. And it's just going to keep going up and down like that, getting them, testing to see exactly where their midline is, if you will. It's based on the 50th percentile. So every student that takes this test gets half the questions right, half the questions wrong, in order to find their median, if you will. So students who are used to taking an Iowa Basic test and say, I only missed 2 questions, probably left this just infuriated because they had to get half wrong in order for the test to find a midline. Now, where their midline is going to be different, and every child is different. So the child that really performs well, they're going to have hard questions. And the results are going to show that they're at a level of mastery that's very high. They're performing in the 90th percentile. But to the student, it's going to feel like this was a very awful test. So in math exam, for example, I was in the lab, and very quickly we had kids that were being given questions in calculus and trigonometry, something that they wouldn't even know what the terminology is, let alone be able to answer the question. But it's because they had answered several questions in a row right, so it's going to throw them a really hard question to see what can you do with this. And so that process continues throughout the test. Because the test is so adaptive like that too, all the kids have a first question, and they all vary. If you watch the computers, all of them have different questions, but it's all based at an age-appropriate question. If it's a normal class in that computer lab, we would expect that from the very start, half the students are going to get that first question right, and half are going to get it wrong. So again, a very different kind of test. It's constantly adapting. And then from that, it's going to give each child a RIT score. And that's kind of what we're used to say. How does it breaks the student population into a huge spectrum, if you will, from those students that are struggling in certain areas to those that are performing high. And it's going to split that into several subgroups. And that's the report that you're going to get here at parent-teacher conferences. Once we have a RIT score, it's our goal to have each child set a goal for themselves to where their RIT score is going to be. So how this is, again, is different is that we should see those RIT scores changing from each test and across the years. Versus if a child takes an Iowa Basic test, for example, or let's say classroom performance. Some kids get very frustrated because every quarter they get a C in math. They're like, I always get a C, I'm not learning anything, I got a C first quarter, I got a C second quarter, I got a C third quarter. But what children don't often understand, and maybe even parents once in a while, is that in order to get a C in the third quarter, you had to learn a lot. Okay? A C in the third quarter means something very different than a C in the first quarter. There was a lot of information given, and you were able to grow enough to still get a C. Because if we had given you, let's say, a Chapter 8 test in the first quarter, you probably would have failed it. But you got a C on it. So there's been academic growth. But that C, or on an Iowa Basic test, 70th percentile, 70th percentile, 70th percentile, people get this impression that there's no growth occurring. And that's why we like a RIT score. Because let's say your child's always going to be performing at the 70th percentile. In order to do that, year after year after year as they age, their RIT score is going to have to go up. And so it's all about setting goals and improving. And that's what you're going to see on their reports. This is the report that you're going to get in the classroom. And again, there are RIT score information on here, but for now that's not going to mean much to you. We're not dealing with percentile ranks or anything like that. It's just their RIT score. And on this report, your teacher's going to show you that this would be our goal. So here's where they're at. This is going to be our goal for the test, which is going to take place in January. These tests take place every 4 months. So we do one in September, one in January, one in May, and then we get through the summer, we start again in September. So every 4 months there's a test. And again, the purpose of this test is to constantly be challenging your child to improve and to show them how their scores are improving. On the side margin now, again, unfortunately, parents, yours will be black and white because we didn't pay for color printing, but you'll see how the math test, for example, is broken into subcategories, and those that are bold, dark on your handout will be areas where they're doing well, And then areas where the print is boldface are areas maybe where they're performing slightly below average. And if there's nothing, it's just white and normal, that means they're performing right where they should be for their age. And so this child, again, has some areas of strength, some areas that maybe need to be worked on. Both of these RIT scores that they put up here as the sample, the child is performing really at age level. Long term, a few years from now, maybe next year or the next May, not this year, eventually we're going to get you to this kind of report. And this kind of report is, again, geared towards that growth. So here again, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for a trend line that's always increasing. Again, if we are a normal school, see, and this is where the news kind of gets things really messed up. If we're a normal school, on this particular test, half of our students should be below the line, and half should be above. It's based on 50th percentile. Statistically, there should be no way that all of our students could be above the line. That's not the way the test is written. Do we want all of our students to be performing to their best of ability? Yes. Do we want all of our students to kind of be in this yellow and green range? Yes. But the way the test is written, it's designed to challenge students and to kind of, again, that 50th percentile is the issue. They're always trying to split students between the upper 50th percentile and the lower 50th percentile. Let me give you another example to help you kind of understand how this affects your child. Let's say in a classroom setting, I gave a spelling test, and the majority of the class got 18 or 19 correct out of 20. Your child got 3 wrong. So, if I was straight up grading it, they would get an 85%, which would be a B on the test. But, because most of the students got only 18 or 19 wrong, your child now would fall below the midline because they were not in the top 50th percent of the students performing in their classroom. So, is your child a failure at getting only 3 wrong on a 20-question test? No, but they're performing below the 50th percentile for their class or the school. And so, if that helps you understand a little bit, we're just trying to avoid panic when people start looking at scores and saying, how come my child is below? It doesn't mean necessarily the same thing as getting a failing grade or being like under 50%. People are going to say my child's failing. That's not what these tests are showing. So, just to summarize again, I want to keep moving here. A math test is norm, so that 50% of the students we test will be above average, but then that means, don't you love, maybe some of you are looking that way right now, that potentially 50% will be below average. Now, we could be an above average school, and we tend to be. We tend to be an above average school when we've done testing and other forms of tests. We do tend to have more of our students above the 50th percentile, so we tend not to be an average school. Nevertheless, it would be unrealistic for us to think that all of our children here are going to be above the 50th percentile, because that means there's another school out there, potentially, statistically, where all the children are below. I'm thinking we are more of a normal school. Math test goals are set. So you're going to get this report tomorrow or on Wednesday that says this is where we would like your child to be. Just like the test, the goals are designed to be at the 50th percentile. They're looking at your RIT score and saying, what is enough of a goal to challenge most students? And again, it's normed at the 50th percentile, so they set a goal for your child where they know full well that half the students will reach that goal, but then it's really easy to find pictures of frustrated kids. But there's also, that means that 50% of the students perhaps aren't going to meet that goal. And again, if you get a January report and then a May report, you as parents shouldn't freak out because your child didn't meet their goal, because again, if we're a statistically average school, half the students in our school should not be able to reach that goal. That's just the way the test is designed. Students may reach their goals and test above average one time, so maybe this year, this first test here in September, your student did great, but then that also means that their next time, their January test, the results will be different. And we've already noticed that because we kind of did a trial run last April, and now we did it in September. We've already seen some scores really flip-flop. We had one student that was way below the midline in that red zone, and then they're now in the blue zone for a test for math. And I know that, I mean, God bless her, but I know that this particular child did not spend their summer cramming math in order to do better on their math test. And so now, which is the correct score? The spring test that we took last year or the fall test that we just got done? And so until we get a couple tests under our belt and start seeing a trend line, it's very difficult for us to say this is exactly how your child's performing and these are areas of strength and areas of concern. We really need to see a couple tests. And MAP is very upfront with that. They say that you really would like, they would like to see at least 3 tests under your belt before you start looking at data across time. So, but at the same time, we want to get you the information and not wait till the end of the year. Why are we doing MAP testing? Why the switch? Again, I do think that when you look at what MAP test does and those RIT scores, it gets very specific about what each child is ready to learn once we know exactly where your child's at. So again, it's going to take a couple tests. But once we start seeing those trends, the RIT scores are very specific about what areas of mastery each child has and where there's areas of struggle. And that's across the board. So even high-performing students, it's going to tell us what the child's ready to learn next. And based on their scores, what areas they could be working on. Teachers will also maybe be able to identify areas of concern and strengths in our curriculum. So if we see a pattern across students, if all the fourth graders are performing a certain way time after time, it might mean that we have to look at our curriculum and make some changes there. So both for individualized instruction and for the curriculum, we'd be interested. For students, again, we want students to understand that what they do in that computer lab is going to impact their learning and how we teach them. And so over time, we want students to be invested in stretching themselves to the next goal. Once they know what areas of strengths and weakness they have, again, we as teachers want to go through this with the students, we're hoping that that will give them a better understanding of where their skills lie, areas that they can work on. It's going to get very specific in terms of what types of reading levels and books they can be working on, what kinds of math problems they're ready to work on next. So very specific data that says if this is your RIT score, you only can achieve this RIT score if you really have your times tables down. And so with this kind of RIT score, it tells us that you're ready to start working on fractions or percentages now. So it really boils it down to some very specific details. And again, we're hoping that that's just going to motivate students to understand who they are as academics and to see again that they are growing test after test. Again, some students get very frustrated when their grade is C, C, C. But when their RIT score is going up, I think they're going to start to see that they're growing. Maybe their grades aren't changing, but they are growing in terms of their knowledge and their mastery of certain subjects. And we want motivated and excited kids. For you as parents, again, you're going to get some information now already, and more information is going to come with each test. But we hope that it gives you a better understanding, too, of how your child is performing and how they compare to other students in the state or in the country. But even more importantly than that, what they're ready to work on next. So if you're picking out reading material, books for them to read at home, if you're looking maybe for summer, some of your children were just enrolled in summer programs where they can be working on math. If you go to a place like Renaissance Learning or one of those places, these scores are going to translate directly into what your child is ready to learn next. So it helps you as parents. Final 2 slides, and then we're done already, and I can answer questions. MAP testing really is this growth mindset is something we're talking to the kids about. When kids come in and say, I'm never going to be good at math, that is this closed growth mindset which says that I don't have the ability to learn something new. And research now is showing that every brain continues to grow throughout their life. We used to say by age 6 the map was kind of set in the brain and there's not much growing, but research even with like stroke victims and Alzheimer's patients shows that the brain can be retaught and rewired throughout their life. And so there is no cutoff point where it says, well, if you didn't get math by 2nd grade, you're you're locked into the bad math group now, or the slow reader group. The math is, the research shows that there's always growth occurring, and that you can develop your brain to acquire new skills and improve in certain areas. And that's really what math testing is showing too, is that the child is always growing, that you're not ever plateaued, that the brain is always developing and acquiring new skills. And so we're looking at those RIT scores to help the child understand that they are growing as a student. And then finally, math testing also connects to research that shows that when students just see that they're growing, when they believe in themselves, this word efficacy just says, I have some control over my life, versus I have no control over my life. Everything just happens to me. But just simply believe that they have control over their life, that they have control over what they learn, that they have a voice in how much they grow. Just having that belief impacts learning. So students that believe that they can improve their scores, that believe that they can have a hand in how they develop as students, that alone tends to improve learning. And that's something we're also trying to convey to our students, that you have a say in how well you do. It's not something that, I always tell the kids, don't say that the teacher gave me a C on my test. Because really what happened is that you earned a C on your test. And that's a very different way of thinking. And it also means then that you can do better. Because if the teacher's just doling out grades, you have no control. But if you're earning a grade, if you are owning your own achievement, that means you are the one that has the greatest influence on how you perform. So those are the two kind of key things with math testing that are also just tied to what we're trying to talk to your kids about. All right, almost 20 minutes on the dot. What questions do you have, if any?